I think the interesting thing from the perspective of the journey over time with CEOs over the last decade is that perhaps in the mid-2000s they were finding their way. By the time we got to 2010, there was a lot of faith and a lot of bullishness around the role that markets could play to solve sustainability problems. But you're right, clearly now in 2013, there are real concerns about pace of change and about scale. But it's not all bad news. Despite a very clear call from CEOs to work with governments to align market incentives, we do see a small group, a cluster of high performers, we call them transformational leaders, who are able to achieve both high performance in business and to drive sustainability leadership. Transformational leaders in the study were leaders who were, from a technical perspective, able to be high performers in business and sustainability leaders. But the real twist was that they answered the questions differently. They had a different way of framing sustainability in their organizations, a different way of thinking about and acting on sustainability. Some of the key differences, for example, were that they very rarely talked about philanthropy or more traditional old school corporate social responsibility. The language was very much around top line growth, new markets, new products, services, really the language of opportunity. Another very clear distinction was that the notional leaders, as we call them, the low performers, were in many cases very reliant on themselves, weren't prepared to collaborate, whereas transformational leaders absolutely felt that partnerships across the value chain with NGOs, with development partners, was critical to achieving success. So growth and partnerships being two key elements of the transformational leadership approach. From the conversations we had with chief executives, from more than 1,000 chief executives, what was very clear is that on the one hand, they remain very committed to sustainability. We see organizations like the Global Compact growing at 30–40% a year, broadening really the platform and the number of companies engaging. But you're right, it's not enough. CEOs told us very clearly that they don't believe, 2/3 of them don't believe business is doing enough. And so those same CEOs call for two things. One, to work with governments to align market incentives, to put prices on things like carbon, energy, water, waste, to allow markets to work more effectively and to compete. And then secondly, there was a real call for transformational leaders to double down, to find new sources of innovation, to make the business case, to drive impact, but also to give those examples that chart a path to the future of both high performance and sustainability leadership. I think that there is a clear view amongst CEOs that the business case remains difficult, that particularly with a global economy that continues to be sluggish, that they're strapped for financial resources to invest. And many CEOs told us that outside of the sectors that can directly monetize sustainability, so the companies like the Philipses, the Ecolabs, the Siemens, the Novozymes, who are able to orient their products and services to tackle big sustainability issues, but then actually to monetize that. Outside those sectors, some of those guys, really transformational leadership, businesses that perhaps only have an efficiency gain or perhaps have a long-term brand trust and reputation gain are struggling to make the business case beyond a certain level of investment. And they're struggling to have that conversation with investors. And I think that clearly that sounding of an alarm that for some of the companies who've invested heavily, either personally or as organizations, they're struggling as they go through a maturity curve. They've actually collected a lot of the low-hanging fruit, and without pricing mechanisms, without market incentives, without the parameters of the way markets work being reset, it's difficult to see a path to scale at speed on sustainability.